My mother secretly added herself to my homeowner's insurance and drafted fake legal documents to steal my $410,000 lake house, all so she could give it to my sister who was secretly having an affair with my husband. So I stayed silent for months and let them walk blindly into a trap that ended with criminal fraud charges and 2 brutal divorces. Original post. I almost choked on my dry turkey when my older sister, Chloe, put her arm around her teenage daughter one Christmas and announced, "This house will be yours one day." My mom, Brenda, turned to me with a warm, sickeningly sweet smile like it was already settled. My husband, Mark, who was sitting right next to me, just stared down at his plate and took a sip of wine. I just sat there, chewing my food, because I was the only person at that table who knew that this entire family was a hollow, rotting lie. Let me back up and give you some context. My name is Jane. I'm 33 years old, and I am a licensed electrician. I own a mid-sized electrical contracting company that I built from the ground up. I work 50 to 60 hours a week. My hands are always calloused, and I'm usually too tired to deal with family drama. When I was 26, I found a listing for a dilapidated lakefront cabin about an hour outside of our city. And I am using the word cabin very generously. The roof was caving in, the deck had completely collapsed into the mud, and raccoons had claimed the living room. The previous owner had passed away, and his children just wanted it gone. So they listed the property for $95,000. I had been saving aggressively since I started my apprenticeship, and I saw the potential. I bought it outright in cash. No mortgages, no co-signers, and absolutely no help from my family. For the next 4 years, I spent every single weekend, holiday, and vacation day breathing life back into that property. I put on a new roof, built a massive wraparound deck, rewired the entire electrical system myself, and replumbed the bathrooms with the help of my Uncle Pete, my dad's brother, and the only decent relative I have. By the time I was finished, the property was appraised at a staggering $410,000. It was my sanctuary. My husband, Mark, 35, is a software developer. We've been married for 4 years. For a long time, I thought Mark was my rock. He was quiet, polished, and seemed to balance out my rough-around-the-edges, blue-collar lifestyle. Then there is my mother, Brenda, and my sister, Chloe, 37. My dad walked out on us when I was 10. And my mother has never let us forget the sacrifices she made. But she isn't a screaming, throwing plates kind of toxic. She is subtle. Everything she does is wrapped in a thick layer of guilt and framed as family loyalty. Chloe has been the golden child since the moment she was born. Chloe is a freelance interior designer who rarely actually designs anything. Married to a man named Todd, an insurance adjuster with the personality of a wet napkin. They have 2 kids. The moment I finished renovating the lake house, my family decided it was a public resource. Chloe would book weekends without asking, leaving the place completely trashed. My mom gave the security gate code to her church friends. I put a hard stop to it 2 years ago, changed the locks, and demanded they ask for permission. My mom cried. Chloe called me a selfish monster. Mark, my own husband, told me I was overreacting and being hostile to my own blood, but I held my ground. Or at least, I thought I did. The real nightmare started in October, 2 months before that fateful Christmas dinner. My Uncle Pete called me on a Tuesday morning with a very strange question. He asked, "Jane, did you recently add your mother to your homeowner's insurance policy for the lake house?" I laughed. "No, Pete, why on earth would I do that?" He sighed heavily. "A buddy of mine works at your insurance provider. He was processing some regional files and saw Brenda's name pop up as a named insured on your property. I thought it was weird, so I'm telling you." I immediately called my insurance company. The representative verified my identity, pulled up my file and said, "Yes, it looks like your spouse was added as a named insured back in August." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. My spouse is a man named Mark, not Brenda. Silence on the line. Then the rep said, "Ma'am, the caller identified herself as your spouse, provided your social security number, and had herself added to the policy. The name is Brenda." I told the rep to flag the account for fraud, hung up, and sat in my work truck for 30 minutes, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Adding herself to the insurance didn't give my mother the deed to the house. So what was her endgame? I didn't confront her. Growing up with a manipulator teaches you to never show your hand until you have the whole deck. A week later, I found the second piece of the puzzle. I was going through a stack of junk mail at the lake house when I found a letter from a shady, low-budget paralegal office downtown. Inside was a document titled Memorandum of Verbal Agreement. It stated that in 2019, Brenda had loaned me $50,000 to purchase the lake house. And in exchange, I had verbally agreed to grant her a 50% ownership stake in the property. It was notarized and looked very official. Here was the massive, glaring problem. My mother did loan me $50,000 in 2019, but I had already owned the lake house for 3 years by then. The loan was to buy 2 new commercial vans for my electrical business when my old ones broke down. Furthermore, I had paid her back every single cent, with interest, over a period of 24 months. I had the canceled checks and bank statements to prove it. Someone had taken a real financial transaction, completely fabricated the context, and turned it into a fake legal claim against my $410,000 property. I immediately hired a ruthless real estate and civil litigation attorney named Karen Adler. I showed her the fake document. She told me, "Jane, this isn't legally binding on its own, but if they file it with the county clerk, it creates a cloud on your title. You wouldn't be able to sell or refinance without spending tens of thousands in court to clear it. Whoever drafted this knows exactly how to weaponize the legal system to extort you." I knew exactly who helped her. Todd, the insurance adjuster, knew how to navigate the insurance fraud. And Todd's cousin was a paralegal at the exact firm on the letterhead. But why? Why was my family going to such extreme criminal lengths to steal my house? I found the answer 3 days later, and it shattered my entire universe. I was looking for some old tax returns in Mark's home office to take to my lawyer. Mark was at the gym. While digging in his desk drawer, I found an old iPad he thought was broken. I plugged it in, and it booted up. It was still synced to his iCloud account. Right there on the screen, a text message popped up from my sister Chloe. "I can't wait until tonight. I need you so badly. Todd is driving me insane." I stopped breathing. My vision blurred. I clicked on the message thread and scrolled up. I read through months, nearly a year, of vile, graphic, undeniable proof that my husband was sleeping with my sister. They were meeting at cheap motels, hooking up in Mark's car, and even sleeping together in my guest room while I was out working late on construction sites. But the absolute worst part wasn't the affair. It was the group chat. There was a separate text thread with Mark, Chloe, and my mother, Brenda. I read messages that made me want to vomit. My mother knew everything. Not only did she know, she actively encouraged it. Brenda wrote, "Mark, you need a woman with class who actually knows how to be a wife. You two belong together." Mark replied, "I know, Brenda. I'm just trying to figure out the finances. If I divorce Jane now, the prenup protects her business and the lake house since she bought it before we got married." Chloe chimed in, "Don't worry, babe. Mom and Todd have a plan for the house. Once Mom gets her name attached to the title with that paralegal document, she's going to transfer her 50% to me. We can force Jane to buy us out, or we force a sale and keep the lake house for ourselves. Todd doesn't know about us yet. He just thinks he's helping Mom get her fair share. My own mother, my own sister, my own husband. They were a unified front of absolute evil. Todd was the idiot mastermind of the financial scam, thinking he was securing an asset for his own marriage, completely unaware that his wife and mother-in-law were planning to use that stolen asset to fund Chloe's new life with my husband. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A terrifying, icy calm washed over me. I took out my phone and recorded a video of every single message on that iPad, scrolling slowly to capture the dates, the times, and the phone numbers. I took screenshots and emailed them to a secure account. Then I put the iPad exactly back where I found it. The next day, I walked into Karen Adler's office and said, "I need to add a divorce to my legal tab, and I want to destroy these people completely." Update 1. For the next 2 months, I lived a double life. I smiled at my husband. I kissed his cheek. I made him dinner. I went to family gatherings and hugged my mother and sister. Every time Mark touched me, my skin crawled. But I knew that if I tipped them off too early, they would hide their assets, delete the messages, and change their story. I spent that time building an ironclad, bulletproof arsenal. Karen and I hired a private investigator who followed Mark and Chloe. We got high-definition photos of them walking into a Motel 6 holding hands, and pictures of them kissing in the parking lot. Then, I executed a crucial move. I called my mom on a random Tuesday, keeping my voice light and cheerful. My state is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. "Hey, Mom," I said. "I'm doing some tax auditing for the business. I just wanted to confirm for my accountant that $50,000 you loaned me back in 2019, that was specifically for the 2 commercial work vans, right? And I paid the final installment in March of 2021? Without missing a beat, Brenda said, "Yes, Jane, of course. It was for your work trucks. What else would it be for? And yes, you paid it back. Why are you bothering me with this? Just keeping my record straight. Love you, Mom." I hung up, saved the audio file in 3 different locations, and sent it to my lawyer. The fake memorandum, claiming the loan was for the house, was now officially destroyed by her own recorded words. Which brings us back to that Christmas dinner. Chloe stood up, glowing with arrogance, and announced to the whole family that the lake house would stay in the family for her daughter. Brenda nodded proudly. Mark stared at his plate, the cowardly snake he was. I sat there, pulled out my phone, opened my security app, and changed every single access code to the lake house. The front gate, the garage, the smart locks on the doors. I generated random 1-2-digit passwords. Then I looked up, smiled, and said, "Nobody is inheriting my house." The room went dead silent. Chloe's smug smile froze. "Jane, we talked about this as a family." "No," I replied calmly. "You talked about it without me. The house is mine. It will always be mine." Brenda leaned forward, putting on her best victim face. "Jane, after everything I've done for you, after the money I gave you for that house, you are going to disrespect us like this?" I looked directly into my mother's eyes. "What money for the house, Mom? Do you mean the $50,000 for the work trucks that I paid back 3 years ago?" Brenda blinked. A flash of panic crossed her face. She knew she had been caught in a lie, but she couldn't figure out how much I actually knew. Todd shifted uncomfortably. Mark finally looked up, his face pale. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and said, "Merry Christmas." I walked out. Mark hurried after me, playing the role of the confused peacemaker all the way home. I let him sweat. The next few weeks were a flurry of panicked activity on their end. Chloe brought a contractor to my house to measure for renovations, only to find the gates locked and my security cameras tracking her. She called me, furious, demanding the new codes. I ignored her. In February, Karen Adler fired the first warning shot. She sent a formal cease and desist letter via certified mail to Brenda. It explicitly stated that the $50,000 loan was for a vehicle, that the paralegal memorandum was a fabricated fraud, and that Brenda's unauthorized addition to my insurance policy had been officially reported to the insurance company's fraud division. The family erupted. My phone blew up with dozens of calls from Brenda, Chloe, and Todd. Finally, Todd left a voicemail. He sounded professional and controlled. "Jane, this has gotten out of hand. Your mother is terrified. We don't need lawyers. Let's sit down as a family and work this out." I texted back, "I am happy to meet you. Wednesday at 10 a.m. at my attorney's office. Mark will be joining us." Update 2. That Wednesday morning was the most glorious day of my life. I arrived at Karen's office early. We had a thick binder sitting in the center of the conference table. At 10 a.m. sharp, they walked in. Brenda was dressed in her Sunday best, trying to look dignified. Chloe wore a sharp blazer, looking haughty. Todd was in a cheap suit, carrying a briefcase. Mark walked in last, looking completely miserable, still pretending he was just there to support his wife. They sat down across from me and Karen. Brenda immediately put on her teary-eyed mother routine. "Jane, sweetheart, please. Let's just talk about this." Karen didn't even blink. She opened the binder. "Mrs. Brenda," Karen said in a voice like cracking ice. "In August, you committed felony insurance fraud by impersonating Jane to alter a policy. In October, you and Todd conspired with a paralegal to fabricate a legal document claiming ownership of Jane's property based on a loan that was demonstrably for commercial vehicles." Karen slid the bank statements, the canceled checks, and a USB drive across the table. "We have the loan repayment records. We also have a recorded phone call from January where you explicitly admit the loan was for the trucks. If you attempt to file that fake memorandum, you will go to prison." Todd's face was drained of all color. He realized instantly that his grand scheme to secure a multi-$100,000 asset was dead, and that he had actively participated in a crime. "Jane," Todd stammered, We were just trying to protect the family legacy. We thought you agreed." "I'm not finished," I interrupted, my voice echoing in the quiet room. I looked at Todd. "Todd, you thought you were scheming to get this house for you and Chloe, right? You thought you were securing a vacation home for your kids?" Todd frowned, looking confused. "Yes, of course. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I tossed it onto the center of the table. You should probably open that. Todd hesitated, then opened the envelope. He pulled out the 8x10 glossy photographs our private investigator had taken. Photos of Mark and Chloe walking into the Motel 6. Photos of them kissing. Todd stopped breathing. The silence in the room was so absolute you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "What is this?" Todd whispered, his voice cracking. "That," I said, leaning back in my chair, "is my husband and your wife. They've been sleeping together for almost a year." Chloe let out a horrified gasp and covered her face with her hands. Mark buried his head in his arms on the table. "But wait, Todd. It gets better," I said, my voice dripping with venom. I slid a printed transcript of the group chat across the table. "Read the texts. Chloe and Mark were planning on taking the house from me. And then Chloe was going to divorce you, take your kids, and move into my house with my husband. And my mother? She was in the group chat cheering them on." Todd picked up the transcript. His eyes darted back and forth as he read his mother-in-law praising Mark for cheating on me and strategizing how to leave Todd with nothing. Todd stood up so fast his chair crashed to the floor. He turned to Chloe, his face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "You. Disgusting. Filthy, lying." He couldn't even finish the sentence. He threw the papers at her face, turned to Brenda, spat on the floor right next to her designer shoes, and stormed out of the office. We heard the heavy glass door slam downstairs. I looked at the three of them remaining. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably. Real tears of absolute terror. Chloe was hyperventilating. Mark couldn't even look at me. Karen folded her hands. "Here is how this is going to go. Brenda, you will sign a sworn affidavit relinquishing any and all claims to the lake house. In exchange, Jane will not forward this binder to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. However, the insurance company is already conducting an independent fraud investigation, and we will not stop them." My mother picked up the pen with violently shaking hands and signed the document. Then Karen turned to Mark. "Mark, Jane is filing for divorce today. Thanks to your infidelity and this documented conspiracy to defraud her of a premarital asset, you are going to walk away with exactly nothing. If you try to fight for alimony or a share of her business, we will drag this affair and your complicity in real estate fraud into open court." Mark just nodded, tears dripping off his nose onto the mahogany table. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and looked at my mother and sister one last time. "You wanted my house so badly? You wanted my husband? Congratulations, Chloe. You can have him, but you're both going to be homeless." I walked out with Karen, leaving them weeping in the conference room. The fallout was spectacular. The insurance company concluded their independent investigation. They didn't send my mother to prison, but they hit her with a massive civil penalty and demanded back payment of premiums. She had to drain her entire retirement savings to pay the $9,000 fine to avoid prosecution. Todd filed for divorce from Chloe the very next morning. Because of the undeniable proof of the affair and her involvement in a financial crime, Todd got primary custody of their 2 kids and kept their marital home. Chloe was forced to move into a tiny, cramped 1-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town. My divorce was finalized smoothly. Mark was so terrified of the fraud evidence going public and ruining his career in the tech industry that he signed the settlement agreement without a single argument. I kept my business, my savings, and my lake house. The beautiful irony? Once Mark realized Chloe was broke, had lost custody of her kids, and wasn't getting a multi-$100,000 lake house, he dumped her. He moved to another state to start over, leaving Chloe completely alone and destitute. My mother is now a social pariah. Uncle Pete found out everything and told the entire extended family. Nobody invites her to holidays anymore. She sits alone in her house, complaining to whoever will listen about how her children abandoned her. As for me, I'm sitting on the wraparound deck of my beautiful lake house right now. Uncle Pete is down by the water, casting a fishing line and drinking a cheap beer. The sun is setting, casting a gorgeous orange glow over the water. The air is quiet, peaceful, and entirely mine. They thought I was just a tired worker bee who would surrender to keep the peace. They forgot that when you build things with your own 2 hands, you know exactly how to tear them down. Top comments. User 1. My jaw physically dropped when you pulled out the PI photos for Todd to see. Todd was a scumbag for trying to steal your house. but watching him realize he was just a pawn in his wife's sick affair with your husband? That is cinema. You didn't just burn the bridge, you nuked the entire city. Bravo. User 2. The mother is the most evil person in this story. Encouraging your daughter to sleep with your other daughter's husband just because you think the cheating daughter is more maternal? She deserves every ounce of loneliness she is experiencing right now. Thank God Uncle Pete is a real one. User 3. As a lawyer, the way your attorney handled the memorandum of verbal agreement is pure perfection. Those paralegal mills that draft fake documents for cheap rely on the victim getting scared and paying a settlement. Getting your mom on tape admitting the loan was for a truck was the ultimate checkmate. You secured your assets flawlessly. Enjoy that lake house!